Hello everyone. Today I will be demonstrating a cold and dark startup of the Flight Factor A350. As you might know, will probably know, it's been recently updated with a new FMGC with new features. So it is really a pleasure to fly. It's by no stretch of imagination perfect. Many people complain still about textures and so forth and so on. But with a couple of touches, cockpit textures updates, and right liveries to sort out the exteriors, that makes a massive difference. And the FMOD sound pack is really a pleasure to fly. I've done so far probably 10 long haul flights, and it has given me absolutely no issues at all, not a single hiccup. But the FMS works phenomenally well. Now, there isn't much online in terms of startup, especially now that it's been all updated. There's no cold and dark to be found. And even online, even from real pilots, it's difficult to find. I've just found one from a South African crew that goes through the entire cold and dark. So I thought I'll put this one here for people who might want to buy or might be struggling with bringing it up. There is a very useful checklist integrated in the Flight Factor, but it's not entirely realistic, and following it it takes a little bit of time because of course you need to keep switching screens. So I've always really appreciated when people did cold and dark on a YouTube video and I could just follow along, so I thought I'll do that. To create this cold and dark let's say checklist and procedure, I also had a look at the FCOM, the original Airbus FCOM for the A380, because the A350 doesn't exist, it's not available anywhere. You can find the A380, which is practically identical in terms of procedures to the A350 systems and everything really. So this is well, as realistic as I could make it. Now we have to say that the A350 has a lot of computer systems and a lot of computer things that need to be programmed that are not simulated in the Flight Factor. So of course this has been adjusted for the simulation and is only relevant to the Flight Factor A350 at the moment. But let's step in. Now, one thing to note, very important, in that the Flight Factor A350 comes by default with a not really realistic configuration of the systems and the overhead panel. And there is a very useful script, a Lua script created by Ben Air, I believe is his name, and he created a livery, no, not livery, sorry, the cockpit textures mod, an overhaul of the cockpit textures, and it includes as well this Lua script, and I would highly recommend to install because it really puts all your overhead and other systems the way they should, and in reality the way they are left by the crew. Now you'll see my textures are slightly different. This is because I don't particularly like wear and tear and scratches, especially on an airplane that is, well, 7 years old at most, the oldest there is in circulation. So I adjusted this one, removing all the scratches and etc. But this is very similar to what you find online. And let's get on with it. Let's start. Now we start over here on the pedestal, and we start by checking that the engine master levers are off. Check that the engine starter is in the normal position. We check that the gear lever is down, that the wipers are off, and then we can start the batteries and get some sort of electrical power. Now there are 4 batteries on the A350. We start with the left one, battery 1, then emergency 1, emergency 2, and battery 2. At this point we have power, but not all the screens, so we need some ground power to continue. Now, first we adjust the lights. We have the console light, so the lights around the instruments, this white halo here is here on the console on the left. And then we have some floodlights on the pedestal here. Now it's, well, this day is quite bright, so we don't need these, but you have these over here, foot floodlight and the pedestal floodlight in case you need them. Once you adjusted those, we go here into what in reality would be the OIS, but it's our option panel, let's say. We go on to ground service, so select here, go up into ground service, select doors and hatches. We'll do load config. We open only the doors that we need to load the airplane. Then we go on ground equipment. And we select auto config for the ground services. And then ground power unit 1 and 2. There we go. At this point, go on the overhead. And we turn on external. You see it's available 1 and 2. External 1 and external 2. They're both on. Now we have full power the aircraft. Takes a while to align the IRS, so we'll turn them on now. IRS 1, 2, and 3. We can put the nav lights on now that we have electrical power. We can do an uninitiator test, so a light test. Brings as well the fire warning, let's say. You can see all the lights are on, coming up. And automatically switches off. We check that the radios are on, so in case we need to get our ATIS and start communicating with ATC. We come down here, we have 2 radios, in the real one you have 3, but that's where we have our actual DOLIS MCDU. And you can decide to configure all the airplane from this MCDU, but the one that actually comes with the A350 works pretty spot on. So in terms of realism, I suggest to familiarize yourself with that one. Otherwise, this one is only on the A320 and A330, I believe. So it's not totally realistic to have this one here. As I said, the radio, if they're not on, they might be just a matter of brightness. You can turn the knob over here, brightness. Then we select VHF 1. The light is very dim here, so it's difficult to see, but you can see a difference when it's off and when it's on. So we turn VHF 1 on and the volume up. We turn the knob. And then we need as well intercom here, the cabin announcements, and then the PA. There we are, and we turn the volume on for those. We then set the squawk, so the transponder. You click on squawk up here. We turn this one on to master, so click here next to slave and turn it on to master. We click on mode and we set auto. You need to change your squawk. You need to first click this button here on the right, squawk, set your squawk. Yeah, that's not valid, but set a random squawk. And there we go, and then you are set up. Now we can now load the plane with fuel and passengers. So we bring up our flight plan. Passengers, and if you use SimBrief, passengers are not really relevant because this is a configuration with first class and business class. There's a lot less passengers than SimBrief gives you. I guess you can create a personalized profile on SimBrief, but there's no need. You can just set the zero fuel weight. So we go on the menu here, select airplane. We go on to passengers. Now we need to input the passengers in each one of the classes. So we put a cabin crew of 8. Don't know exactly how many there are, but we put 8 there. We need to reach a zero fuel weight of 168,688. So zero fuel weight you have it here, and we see what happens. We put 20 in first class. We put 32 in business class. We put 150 to begin with in economy, and we're at 165.3. I don't know if this is realistic, but the center of gravity tends to be always pushed at the back in this plane. It would make sense considering there's a lot more people aft of the airplane instead of at the front. So you normally need to kind of balance it by putting some payload at the front. So we might want to try with 140 there, and then add in the LD3 forward compartments, add 3. This is not weight, it's just the amount of, well, cargo containers, let's say. And we're on 168.7. That was like 168.688. That's good. Once you're happy with that, you're happy with the beautiful weight CG. I don't remember exactly the limitations, but you need to make sure that you're around 25 normally works for me. If it's more than 40, it doesn't accept it, and you cannot do the performance calculation at the end. So make sure it's around 25 and you're good. We implement that. Passenger and cargo loaded, it's green, so you're good to go. Now we can move on to fuel. And fuel, you have all the individual figures. I believe you cannot set up a total. So we just go through our SimBrief flight plan here. Trip fuel is 57665, so click once here in the box. Starts blinking. With your keyboard you can enter it. And then press enter once you're done. Alternate, it's 4582. Contingency is 5%, so 2883. APU time, we'll leave it because it's already included there. Taxi time, I mean, you can add if you want. We normally, it depends on the atmospheric conditions. If you want to get some sort of aircon in the cabin and you want to switch on the APU a little earlier, let's say we can add 10 minutes just for safety. Then taxi time, there's an odd one normally. Now I have a different profile on SimBriefs today, so I need to check that, but normally it uses actually half of what it is here in SimBrief, but we'll put what SimBrief says and see what happens. So minutes 20, there we go. To remain, it's your final reserve, so we put 2425. At this point we have 68608 and we need 68054, so a little extra for the APU, and that's it. Good enough. We press on implement and the fuel loaded. These two are green, you're good to go. Make sure if it's not loading fuel or passengers, it's because you don't have in the ground services either the doors open or the ground equipment or the passenger bus or the fuel truck. And that is done. Now, as we said, we now check the aircon, decide whether we want to start the APU straight away or not. So we come here on the pedestal, we check, we tick here, cont, we press it, and we check the aircon. It's 20 degrees in the cabin, so there's no rush, but just to go through the flow that we've created, we'll turn the APU on. Before turning the APU on, we need to go on the overhead and do the fire test, making sure that we have that working. Just come here, check these are closed, we just click on test, all this squib come on, fire red, smoke discharge, you have the 2 on the ECAM, and then you have the 2 on the engine start levers. And that's it, it switches off itself. And at this point we can turn the APU master on. Wait a few seconds. And we can press start. Now come down on the pedestal. Here select APU. So we can check on the system screen here the APU. N1 is rising. And the bleed pressure coming up. EGT rising. Will not be available at 100%. EGT need to stabilize first or down. We can monitor when it's available here by looking at the switch. Make sure, of course, this is the difference between the default and this script that we have. The APU generator by default is off, so you need to turn that on once it's available, while here it's already on. At this point we can just turn the APU bleed on, and you can see default lights on the aircon panel turn off. You can feel probably now the aircon starting work. Then we check as well that the cross bleed selector here is in auto, that the airflow is in normal, and then you can select your temperature for cockpit and cabin. You can check your aircon page here to see the temperature. You can see it's already rising to 23. With the knobs in this position, it shouldn't go much above 23. So we're good. Cross bleed, airflow. We check the temperature. We can turn, or in reality, we would turn one of the external powers off now that they have the APU. In reality, I believe this external one, we can do that just to simulate what happens in reality. And not that it does really, it's not simulated here. Now at this point we do another couple of checks. We come down, we need to check the door page, so select the door page here, and go and check that you have rain repellent, level is normal, cockpit oxygen is 1200 pressure, and the cabin oxygen you have 1200 pressure. Then we turn on hydraulic page and we check the hydraulic fluid. You see this green bar needs to be aligned with this one. I don't think it's simulated that it will ever go down. There's no system failure faults, but it's good, part of the flow, and we do it. And then we check under the door, not engine page here, we check that we have enough oil, and it should be above 13, and we have now 18.3, 18.4, so we're good. Now continue on the pedestal, we check that, so we're here, we do a flow, we continue, and we check that the spoiler agrees with the PFD. So this is your indicator, this is your section of the wing. The flaps, you'll see the flaps coming out here and the slats here, and then you see the spoilers coming up. So the spoilers agree, there's no spoilers deployed, and that's good. We check that the parking brake is on, and the parking brake is on. We check that we have brake pressure. So you see it's at 5, so we have brake pressure and we're okay. Then we check that the flaps agree with the PFD. So flaps 0 and flaps 0. We can now start the overhead. Go on the overhead, and the flow is the classic Airbus from the left bottom to the right top, going in rows. Start down here with captain and purse. It can be captain or captain and purse, that depends on the operator. And then we start the classic Airbus thing, so we work on the assumption that the airplane is ready to go once all the lights, the white lights, are extinguished. Fault lights, they're there because we haven't started the engines yet, but all the white lights need to be off, so we check that as we go. Crew supply, that's the crew oxygen supply, we turn that to on. ADIS have already been initialized, let's say, aligned, so that's good. We check that all these are off, these would be on in the default. Come on to the center, and we check that the strobe light is on auto, that the logo light is on auto, that the seatbelt is on if the fueling is completed, that the no smoking is on, and then the emergency exit light is armed. We then check the probe and window heat is automatic, and it is. We check the aircon panel, we just set it, so that's all good. We check the fuel pumps that are on, so 6 fuel pumps all coming on. Maintenance panel up here, check that there's no white lights. We come here, we check that the cargo, aircon, these are all dark, so they're all on. You can select the temperature, and it's actually simulated. We check everything here is white, that the ground hydraulic, the electric hydraulic pumps, the green and yellow, are both on. And then all the ventilation here is all on. And we are good. Then we come on to the center console. We check that these 3 knobs are all in the center position. we check that the anti-skid is on, the up position is on. We check that on the pedestal here, that the landing gear gravity extension door is closed. We check that the thrust levers are idle, and then the reversers are stored. Then we come here in the center. We check that these switches here are for the TOWs, the weather, radar, and the transponder. We check the system 1 and system 2. They're all on. At this point, we come here on this keypad, we press serve, and these are all the options for the transponder, the tcas, and the weather radar, and the terrain awareness system. So we turn the transponder stays on auto. We turn the tcas on to TA array. You can select above or below as you wish, or leave it normal. All the weather systems here go to auto, to the green light, and the TOWs as well. So everything is green, and we're good with that. At this point, we can start programming the MCDU, the FMS. Now, there is a way to put this screen onto this one, and I normally do that because you will have your flight plan here, or your performance page, and it's a lot easier once you're flying to just check everything here than having to pan the camera all the time. So if you click on this one, always to center, there we go, that's what happens. And also I do display cycle, so the flight plan is right next to the PFD and the ND. We've done that. We come here, this is your checklist step. We're not using, ignore that page. Now in terms of there we are, FNGC survey FMS 1, we select the FMS, and then under active we select init page. We start with init page, we bring up our flight plan over here. Flight number today is Delta Airlines 7. We're going to be flying from KLAX, Los Angeles to Tokyo. Oh. KLAX to Tokyo. Romeo. Juliet Tango Tango. Alternate is going to be Romeo Juliet Golf Golf, Romeo Juliet Golf Golf, and there we go. Now here you could enter your flight plan manually, so you could go onto your flight plan and do everything manually by clicking here and do next waypoint or departure and so forth and so on, but it is long haul, so the routes are really long, and I personally, and also it's not really realistic because nobody in real life does that. They all load company routes. It's a lot easier to just go on in it. We select the route. If you put your FMS plans in the right folder onto, I believe it's output, and then resources output in under the explain folder, then you can load it from here. So route select, we have KLAX to Tokyo there. Click on it, apply, and that's all loaded up. There we go. Now we set the cruise flight level, which is going to be for today an initial 340. 340 goes there. Cost index, it's 30. And there we have it. That's all we need here. We can align the IRS. So we can continue programming by going through this list over here, so it's very easy. So we do IRS first. Align is available in 0 minutes, so we're ready to do that. We click on align, and it fetches automatically the GPS position. Then we go back, click on return. Click on return. We load the departure. The departure for today is going to be summer 2. So left to right, load the runway, which is going to be 25 right. Sit. You click down here, and we have summer 2. And transition, the first point is McKee. We select McKee. Click on temporary flight plan and insert temporary. At this point we have our flight plan. We leave it there for the time being, as we don't have the altitudes and the speed constraints yet. To finish configuration first. So we go back onto the init page. We select the nav aids. Here we can select our nav aids. Now, not having the chart, I cannot show you that, but if on the departure chart you have a particular VOR or an NDB to follow, just for safety, this page here shows you what is tuned for navigation purposes for the FMS. To enter the ones that you want to have shown here on the ND, you click on tuned for display, and here you can enter whichever you want. And the frequency, you cannot select the identifier, the 3 letters identifier, but you can select the frequency. And the ADF, exactly the same, you can select the frequency. Once you hard tune those, you can come back, go back to your init page, and we can do the fuel and load page. Now, fuel and load, we have the 0 fuel weight. We can cross-check that with our flight plan and with what we put in the box here. So we go back to our airplane. Under passengers, we have both 0 fuel weight and the 0 fuel weight center of gravity. So 168.7 0 fuel weight. 168. Oopsie. There we are. 168.7. And 0 fuel weight center of gravity is 24.0. Yeah, 168.7 matches the flight plan. Block fuel. We go on to fuel page. We have 68.6, which matches here what we needed. Press on block fuel 68.6, and that's all in. We need to only enter the reserve. Now here you can cross-check as well what you're doing. This is 100% reliable, the tallest one. But at any one point you can check what's happening. Your init page B, you can check everything is the same here. Now your final reserve is here, half an hour, and you have here 30 minutes on the plan, so that's correct. Your trip is 61.3, 10 hours and 41 minutes, so slightly different, but yeah, that's 10 hours and 37 minutes, so it's the same. Pax number, you could change it, but you've already selected, so it fetches automatically. And that's all good, you don't need to put anything else. You can double check over here the minimum fuel at destination, so sorry, the estimated fuel on board at destination, which is what you find the fuel prediction over here, so it's 6.8, and that's 6. It doesn't, I believe it doesn't show the decimals, but it is 6. We've planned for, we need 57, we loaded 68, should have 11 when we get there. We have 6 somehow, but always double check, it's not 100% accurate, the fuel consumption, so make sure that this is correct. You end up normally having a little bit more than what it predicts of it. And we go with that. So after that, we can go back, return, and go on to the takeoff perf page. And to populate that, we need to use the performance calculator here. We go here, we have already the airport selected. We need to select the runway slope. There we are, I relinked my Navigraph with with the AV tab, I wanted to show you this. Runway slope, it doesn't really change your V speeds that much, but it's a nice thing to do. And it's relatively simple. So if we go on to Atlanta, bring up our airport chart, we're departing to, what do we say we're departing from? We're departing 25, right? Oh, not Atlanta, we're in KLAX. What am I doing today? So KLAX, Los Angeles, bring up the airport chart. There we go, 25 right. A very simple way of calculating the runway slope. We check the altitude of the runway, the elevation, which you find here, at the end of the runway. So bring up your calculator, enter the elevation at the end of the runway, so 115, then do minus the elevation at the start of the runway, 94, so 115 minus 94. We divide that by the length of the runway, which is 12,923 in feet, 12,923, and we multiply that by 100. And that's your runway slope. Runway slope here is 0.16. So let's input the flap settings first. Flaps 1. And you see if it was 0.0, it would be 167, 167, 169. If it was 0.2, it doesn't change, it's not enough. But if it was any more than that, it would start changing. Okay, but it's just to add a little bit of immersion, really. It doesn't make much difference. And there we go. At this point you have your speeds. So 167, 167, 169. And you can put the name. 167, 167, and 169. Now this is the only thing that doesn't really work, I guess, as it's supposed to, because there's a discrepancy between what this one shows and this one shows. Go on the performance page, if I select the flaps 1, it doesn't show them here, and if I select the old-fashioned way flaps 1 here, then gives me a takeoff shift of 1. So this is all a little bit confused, but it works well enough if you do that. Flaps 1, you put them here as well. Then we check our flex temperature. It's 46 degrees. Sometimes it gives you toga if you're very heavy and you need all the power. Today we're not that heavy and we don't have that much fuel, so we can do 46. We can do flex, select here, and then enter 46 degrees. And we're good. Engine out acceleration, I believe, is the same as the thrust reduction. Altitude, select that one, the same as these. The altitude is normally, thrust reduction is automatic, is 1,500 feet above the airfield, so we're at 70 feet, 1,570, and that's good. Yeah, you can check as well over here the climb speed. So on econ 290 0.84, and you have your cruise speeds and your descent, but you can check everything once we're out there. For now we leave the standards there. It's already there. At this point we will check the flight plan. They all make sense. So we go on to flight plan. We turn the knob over here to from arc to plan. 20 should be okay for a long haul. And we have a look here on the NT. We have our flight plan. We start scrolling, pressing this one, and we check all our points. We put as well the constraint. We can see the constraints there, and we can check against the departure procedure. That was the summer 2 departure. We open this and we check that it all matches. There we go. So we're McGee. Dark, below 12,000, and that's below 12,000. Then we go into summer, all off. Reason there's no constraints here at all, so there's no, you can see there's no magenta asterisk, so that means there's no constraints. The only classic constraints is the 250 knots below 10,000. And that's it, and then we continue, we check that the line is uninterrupted. And voila, and we're at destination. The long haul is 10-12 hours, there's no need to put the star now, or winds will change, runways will change, we'll do that before we descend. That's all good. You can just do a final check here at the bottom that you have the fuel on arrival. So 10:41 is the time, estimated time, the flight. You have the fuel on board on arrival, and you have the total distance. So it's a good thing to check, especially, there we go, to check your, it's a good thing to check your total distance. So ground distance 5,140, and it's 5,081 over here. So that's good enough. Not perfect, but good enough, of course. You need to consider stars and sit and etc. There we are. So at this point we just do the FCU configuration. So your panel over here. We start with the loudspeaker. Make sure that it's on max, especially with the FMOD pack. Otherwise you don't hear the call outs from the first officer when you need them when you land. We set the QNH. We check the QNH, and it's 1015 one time, 2 times here, and the standby. There we go. We double check that against the chart. We go on our chart, we check that the altitude is the same. So the elevation, airport elevation 128, and here we are 130. We should be within 20 feet of that, and here we're absolutely bang on the money. And that's good. We select the ND back onto arc and 10, or however you want it. Normally, of course, for departure I put it on 10. We then select all the options over here to display on the ND. So we set the constraints, the airport, VORs, and traffic. And then constraints, airport, the same for the first officer. That's what they normally put. Then of course you will select whether you want the weather radar or the terrain. That's depending of where you are. If you have a lot of terrain around you, as pilot flying, you might want to display terrain. Otherwise you will keep weather, and you can keep the terrain on the first officer. We then check all the autopilot, so we check that the speed and the heading are dotted. There's nothing entered there. We check that the flight director is on. Make sure this is on. Initial altitude is set. Don't have an assigned altitude, but we'll just put it 10,000. And at the same time that the vertical speed box is dotted as well. And we're all good to go. At this point we go and disconnect the external power. So we have APU. It's available always before disconnecting the external power. Make sure that you have APU power and APU gen. Disconnect the external power. We go over here. We close our doors. Go on to ground service, doors and hatches. Close all. And ground equipment. We dismiss everything. There we go. On the pedestal. Well, we close the door. Sometimes it's open, so make sure that the door is closed. And then you can just lock it over here. Of course, we would have done our briefing that we're not going to do today. Assume we've done that. We call pushback. Let's see where we are and where we need to go. We need to turn. Okay, tail to the left.
Hey, Captain, let me know where you want this thing. Great news, Captain. Your tow's coming.
Here we go. Turn the beacon on. Up here on the overhead panel. Beacon is on. And we'll just wait for our pushback that, as usual, comes out of the building and runs over ground personnel. Lovely. We will set here the FMS onto performance. You don't have to
All right. Looks like the doors and hatches
working.
are closed and we're ready to connect.
Reality, normally you would do the pilot flying on performance page, and the pilot monitoring will be on the flight plan, but we don't have that luxury. We can, it's not very useful because it's not very visible, but you can put your flight plan here and do it that way, or do it the other way around, but you can still have two visible. One thing we haven't done is check at the beginning the amps, that they were okay within norm, but I don't think that's simulated, so there wasn't much point in doing that. You would do that at the very beginning.
Aboard,
Check that all the batteries are charged correctly.
Go and kill the parking brake when you're ready to go.
There we are, let's go and kill the parking brake. I find that I need to press my manual brake as well, otherwise pushback doesn't start. Here we go. Now we can start the engines. We turn the engine start selector here to ignition, start. Make sure that once you've seen what you need to see here on the system page, you deselect it so it goes then automatic to what you need. In this case, the engine. You see, down here we have pressure, so we have 40 coming from the APU bleed. We can start the engine. Start engine number 1 first on the A350. Switch the knob, and we can see it starting here, spooling up. And we have monitor the start, N1 is starting to rise. N1 will stabilize at around 20, EGT 400 and 260 and then 380. It's very easy, 2468. There we go, you see these start coming off because these are all the faults that were there because the engines were off. 2468, you're stable, you can start engine number 2. At the same time, you see generator fault light is now off, so the generator engine number 1 is working, running, and the hydraulic pumps as well are running. There we go. All the warnings here are off. Engine 2 is stable. And we have 2 good starts. So what we do now, we put the engine starter back to normal. See? Normal. On the overhead, APU bleed off. Check the engine anti-ice. If It's all automatic, but in heavy icing conditions, we might want to put them on. But the automatic mode is on by default on the Airbus, so turn them on. We turn the APU master off. Meantime, we're still doing the slowest pushback in history. But see, let's wait for him to finish. This beep is your
Sir, the passengers are unhappy in the dark. Why don't you turn on the lights back here?
So yes, funnily enough, when you power the aircraft, of course, the lights as well. I believe it's not exactly the pilot. Might not be the pilot responsibility, but I don't know. Let's see. Options. Don't even remember where they are. Airplane, cabin, there, your lights. Of course, the cabin crew, the cabin attendant there is just annoying, so if it bothers you too much, you can just press this 12 times and he will be killed. Starts threatening you first, but...
Why don't you write a letter to Ramsys Aviation Design, telling them how good you think this model is?
Captain, I regret to inform you that the chief flight attendant has been killed.
There we are. There's a bit of peace. Okay, we're still pushing back. Should be nearly there. Okay, I had to disconnect manually. Better push back because it went a little haywire on me. But there we are. We're now parked up. The pushback cart is gone. We armed the ground spoilers, so you put them up. Flaps go to take off. So 1. Auto brake RTO. So the auto brake is controlled here by the base of the knob, but RTO we just press here. And we have RTO arm, auto brake armed RTO. We check the flight controls. We'll bring up the flight controls page over here. And we check. Pull back, pull forward, neutral, pull left, pull right, neutral, and then rudder left and rudder light. That's all working. We check as well that the pitch trim here is configured. 28, 27, so just a little notch and it's 27. Perfect. Do a takeoff configuration test. So press here and the takeoff config warning here is gone, so we're all good. At this point we put the taxi lights on. Goes to nose on first and then put them to taxi for now. Then runway turn off on. And we can go. Release the parking brake. Little bit of power. It's a cold and dark, but I'll get you down to the runway, ready to start to finish off. In the meantime, while we're taxiing, we double check, just remind ourselves of the V speeds, check the performance page, the runway, making sure that we go the right one. We check as well the gross weight, the fuel on board, that all makes sense. We check the autopilot, so here brake RTO, climb and nav, so climb and nav blue, make sure that those are blue. You're crashing into lots of things, but you hope. There we go, we're arriving at our holding point. Check that the runway is the same as the performance page. 25 right, 25 right, we're good. Stop here for a second. Put the strobe lights on. Landing lights on. Taxi light, nose light on. Double check again, climb and nav are blue. Quick glance, making sure this is all correct. We select already the weather here. ECAM, they're all green, so there's no warnings, there's nothing there active, only green messages, what we expect to see. And we're good to go. Make sure we unload the flight control as we said, so nothing active there. It will show us what we need to know. Release the brake.
Approaching 25 right. On runway 25 right.
And there we are, lining up. Throttle up to 50%. You can see the indication here is set to flex 84.9. We move the levers forward, making sure we get to man, flex 46, SRS, runway heading, auto throttle blue. Thrust is set. Good. FPS are terrible, must be the weather. 100. Check. V1, VR, rotate. Gear is up. Autopilot. And this was Golden Dark, so we'll stop it here because we've done already a lot more than just a Golden Dark. There we are. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you'll find this useful. And have a good flight. Thank you. Bye now.